Aloha. With this video, I just wanted to do I don't know if it's gonna be quick or not, but a video on the psycho-spiritual warfare of the group thought. I talk about a lot about the ways the mainstream mentality is ushering the consciousness of the masses towards this new world order. So the new world order, in the perspective of like the psyche or psychological warfare, spiritual warfare, and even physical warfare, it's based upon focusing on just the psycho-spiritual part of it. It's largely based upon a group thought about the way things should be, or a group thought about the way things are supposed to be. So we are ushered into this mentality. A good example of this is Joe Rogan in his last video, one of the videos that I have, I don't even remember which one it was, but he says, and he says this all the time because this is one of the main talking points, and it's like the blood that runs this artificial body that is the group thought within the psycho-spiritual warfare. This blood within that artificial body is the belief in, the pride in, the synthetic overstanding that our reality is based upon evolution based upon our relationship to technology and so on and so forth. So the main thing is, he says, is in the last video he's talking to Killer Mike, he says, oh, when China made it to the moon, I see that as a win for innovation and science. See, those are two big things right now, like, period. But I just wanted to say that because that phrase right there, because Killer Mike is just talking about, he wants to be all American. He sees that big ass flag behind Joe Rogan. He's trying to meet Joe Rogan at his level with what he's doing, and then trying to get whatever information he can through his outlet to the people. So he's gonna play that game. Like, if you were to have a conversation with him, it wouldn't be like the conversation that had Jordan. This is not to give Killer Mike a pass or anything. This is just to say that people in that world play that game, and there are definitely people who play that game. He's definitely one of them, especially if with the perspectives that are being shared on all the specials, pumping Bernie Sanders, that whole. Democratic socialism is the segue in that. Democratic socialism with Bernie Sanders, sponsored by Killer Mike, trigger warning, so on and so forth, Netflix. That is the segue into the group thought of this new world order, or like a democratic socialist interpretation of the world, instead of a socialist interpretation or democratic socialist interpretation of. And you just get to see what that is. Democratic socialism is just fancy terminology. And it's not even fancy, it's just cheap. It's just a cheap way of saying capitalistic socialism, and that's the new world order. It's capitalistic socialism. So socialism, they're gonna feed the poor or whatever it is. Probably won't even do no shit like that, because the concessions are just bogus. But do something to the extent of making it seem like, like what it would feel like if the system started feeding the poor and like addressing poverty and so on and so forth. It's just to maintain power. It's like just like throwing bread out into the circus. That whole mentality of maintaining dominance. So in the psycho-spiritual warfare game or chessboard, it's about maintaining dominance, control, playing offense and defense. This is largely what a lot of the controllers are very unaware of. The controllers are aware of playing offense and defense, but the so-called truther community and conspiracy communities are very linear, because the way YouTube is designed, it's designed to like cheer on the linear thought process. So like a channel has a certain style, gaming, you know, that's a very tangible sort of thing. It's very good for kind of like, on the whole, simple-minded people. I'm not talking about gaming specifically. I'm talking about the desire, not the desire, but the gravitation towards a simple kind of thought thing, or a linear thought process that involves whatever, entertainment or a game, whatever it is. It's a whole it's a whole conditioning program that has been amplified through the public education system. We've basically been conditioned into this this dumbed down mentality, and that goes back to the original thought, what I was talking about in the video, of this whole group thought mentality, the psycho-spiritual warfare of the mainstream media as a whole. This is what I want to focus the video on now. We talk a lot about the New World Order, but like on many videos, and I've said, okay, it's coming. No, the New World Order is already here. The New World Order starts with the New World psychological group thought. That already exists. So people are just waiting for the psychological group thought to go live. People are already conditioned to accept the New World Order. You're going to have a whole shitload of people accept the New World Order. The contingency plan would be, you know, to have like Alex Jones and crew or whatever, you know, in that whole game, play fight this whole like the villains. Like what is it? Like dinosaurs, like Godzilla versus I don't know, whatever kind of Godzilla, like Mothra or some shit like that. They just put these characters out there to fight. Like, so Mothra is supposed to, or Godzilla is supposed to be on our side, or Mothra is supposed to be on our side, whatever. And then they say, oh, look at those monsters. You know, this is what it's all about. So that's the main thing. That's what I want this video to be focused on, and not to let go, because that once we start to analyze, understand, and overstand the blueprint of a New World Order, like the actual, get into the coding, get into the wiring of the New World Order. So what is the wiring of the New World Order? Well, the wiring of the New World Order is like what you're looking at right now. It's the mainstream media. It's the Ellen group thought. I've had so-called conscious friends, or whatever the hell that means, you know, years ago, telling me, you know, that things are changing because Ellen does such and such and such and such, you know, to some degree, generalizing, but, you know, that's what people base their so-called evolution on. So Joe Rogan says science and technology is evolving, so we are such and such and such and such. Well, people in the so-called New Age community do the same thing, but they don't do it with that. They do it with like Oprah and Eckhart Tolle, and like I said just now, with like Ellen. If Ellen starts talking about like Eckhart Tolle type stuff, or since Oprah is starting up like Super Soul Sunday, the group thought in that whole mentality is, in that whole world, is that things are getting better, things are changing, we are evolving. But that's the whole mentality that I wanted to address even more personally. From this perspective, is like, so people say, oh yeah, well, you know, what do you think? You're saying all this stuff about how fucked up it is, but, you know, so for a perspective in reference to the whole group thought, just imagine what it would be like if we weren't subjected to this whole idea of a human group thought. So just think about how, like, the internet, you know, how great it is and whatever, but look at how it's destroyed so many things too. Just like the idea of colonialism and like chopping down trees, the whole Western ideology, in the Western ideology in reference to just like break it down individually, since we're very linear a lot of the ways in what we think. break down the Western so-called civilization, the colonial group thought mentality that science and innovation is the monkey evolution interpretation of this realm. That's what we're supposed to be doing. Just look at what the relationship is from the perspective of living habitats. Look at the way homes are built. They're not at all, and I don't like using this word, sustainable, but that it fits right now. The home, if you're smart enough, the home should be taking care of you. Like, your home should not be this like cardboard box that you have to pay somebody to make sure, you know, like to live in, like apartment complexes. It's just a cardboard box with a refrigerator and some running water and some warm water, you know, keep the place warm, so on and so forth. But, you know, when you really get into like architecture and start to integrate a lot of these angles and geometry and all kinds of stuff, and even basic science, like basic science that you can look up on YouTube, like even the Earthship stuff, just integrating all these other things, and to emphasize the point that you can design, like, there, if we were left to our own devices outside of this colonial group thought, moving into the New World Order group thought, which is already there psychologically, if we were left to our own expressions without the limitations of this mainstream group thought, we'd be the true so-called evolution, the true evolution of our existence would be well beyond this other bullshit. This is possibly why a lot of the ancient civilizations built a lot of this stuff, and they were seemingly out in the middle of nowhere. I mean, they were tapping into things. They weren't subjected largely. Now, one could argue, like, whatever, that the information itself, since it is like connected in some kind of way, they did have some kind of group thought or mainstream intelligence. One could argue that, but what I'm saying is that in reference to today, and you could argue that for back then, maybe even the technology and the group thought of back then, even the pyramids, maybe even that was a limitation of our potential back then. We never really think about that. Maybe the pyramids and maybe like Machu Picchu, maybe all that stuff is just baseline stuff. Maybe that was the mainstream. Maybe that was what, you know, needed to be released, the pressure that needed to be released. Maybe we have way more potential beyond any of that. But before we even go there, first of all, let's not jump too far. We need to understand, and understand what actually happened within our ancestors and all that technology and all that stuff. So the group thought of the modern technological world, which is Joe Rogan is protecting, and Alex Jones and Owen Benjamin and all these people are still talking about, well, I'm not going to do this, you know, I'm not going to, you know, talk about the civilization as a whole. I just, you know, I want to protect some of it. You know, there is no middle ground here. And when you realize that the very basic nature of your reality has been a total farce, and then there's been people in your entire lineage that have died because of these illusions, there's no more fucking games to be playing. If you're out there talking about arguing all that, you really ain't getting what's going on. You don't understand, or even know, and damn for sure don't understand shit about, you know, what's really going on here. It ain't about the fucking flat versus globe. It ain't about models. It ain't about all that kindergarten blocks and numbers and colors bullshit. This gets down to the nitty gritty of your interpretation of this reality. This breaks open the door into the psychological and the spiritual warfare. So for this video, this is what I'm saying. I just wanted to emphasize, I'm going to close this out. Look at this shit. I haven't looked at the trending page in a while, but you can understand what I'm talking about. This is all designed. Like when you look at like those interviews with like Michio Kaku that go on to like, you know, Good Morning America or whatever it is, and they start talking about NASA shit or something. Like I was just reviewing that video where Michio Kaku was on some kind of regular news station talking about, you know, lasers, the lasers one. And it was the video that I did about NASA creating weather modification and all kinds of HARP and all kinds of shit. the real NASA agenda. So when they have people on there, see, we watch this, we don't see that as like actors, but those are the main actors. Those are the more important actors than the actors in Hollywood. See, this is a proof that they're actors. They ain't got shit to do with science, especially when you understand that science is another version of Hollywood. So you might as well just picture science on the mountaintop or in over Hollywood, just imagine a mountain like the word Hollywood written in Hollywood over the mountain. Just imagine science written that way over like the top of Mount Rushmore or something like that. It's the same thing. It has the same effect on people. It's a whole world. It's a whole group thought. It's a whole effect on people that is the deepest kind of movie magic that is out there. So when you have the scientists casting these spells, and like it was funny in that Killer Mike and Joe Rogan video, Joe Rogan actually called those scientists wizards, because that's exactly what they are. They're casting a religious belief system spell over you, and they just call it the theory of gravity and the theory of relativity, the theory of the Big Bang, the theory, the big dinosaur theory. Like they just say it's all these theories. They back it up with like kind of math, like makes kind of sense math, and then by the time and then they say, oh, we're working on it. You know, we're figuring it out. And this is another theory that backs up that theory. And that theory backs up this theory. So since all these theories back up this original theory, just go along with it. We're the smartest people out there. Just shut up, you little peasants and fucking savages out there. Just go along with our group thought. Shut your fucking mouth. Understand that your monkey evolution is based upon like the idea, the pride in the evolution of science and the evolution of technology, and this word that is innovation. Innovation is like the word for human evolution. So when you hear innovation, think of monkey evolution. Think of monkeys slapping, bones and sticks against rocks, just like Stanley Kubrick, 2001: Space Odyssey. This is why that whole midstream media, so-called, kind of truth world exists. So later on down the road in the future, people will look back, and just like we look back now to 1968 when 2001: Space Odyssey was out, just now mainstreamers look back now and say, oh, well, that was the truth, and that's the truth today, because they don't do any research, because they're still subjecting themselves to the group thought mentality. Today it's just called conspiracy theory group thought. And then you got like progressive group thought. And then you have the aggressive progressive group thought. And then far right and far left group thought. And then this is easy to see with the whole like liberal group thought now. And then the whole questioning about the abortions in New York and this whole thing. This is a group thought mentality. And by the end of the day, you don't really get to think for yourself. Because the thoughts that get presented for you by the overall, like the New World group thought, is largely based upon creating minimal extremes. So that's a very good term for this. So minimal extremes. So like a kiddie pool, like a whole thing. Like so you have the extreme thought process of this means this on this level, like on a lower level. And on a highest level, this means this. And then there's a middle ground. And then the group thought is supposed to fall somewhere in the middle, right? So, but the mainstream media, this is the whole conditioning program, they've set up they've calibrated your extreme thought process, your extreme layers of consciousness, your limitations of consciousness have been set up by the extremes of the group thought psychological spiritual warfare. So you think that the conversation is actually about, this number down here on the bottom and this number down up here on the top, and then we fall somewhere in the middle. So you think, oh yeah, I fall somewhere towards the upper top, the medium top, or medium warm, rather than, you know, like medium cold or something, you know, medium well or medium rare or something like that. Some people see it like a fucking steak, like cooking a steak. This is that whole mentality. Oh, I'm a medium rare guy, or, you know, oh, I'm a rare. You know, I want that bloody. And then the people who just like totally lost, they just gonna follow some old well done ass steak. They don't care. Steak is steak. Give me some A1. It'd be all right. And so that's the majority, that they would want to keep people in that well done ass consciousness. And then, you know, people who are, you know, claiming that, you know, they know about food and all this other shit because they know about a medium rare steak being better in a ribeye than compared to a well done dude. And then they know that they're not stupid. They're not gonna eat raw meat and all this other shit. So it's the whole pride. It's no different than the relationship between, like, people. We don't see this too as a psycho-spiritual warfare too. This is part of the whole group thought mentality. And you see this in conversations with people all the time. I'm starting to, you know, interact with people a lot, and I hear, you know, conversations. But, you know, it's football season right now. Football season is a group thought. So what people don't realize is that another example of this is the compartmentalization of our own, you know, our own worlds. So we have these conditioning pockets that are out there. We call them like NFL teams, NBA teams, baseball teams, things to do. Like, I'm a martial artist, or I'm this, or I'm that, and I'm this. And so we have all these things. This is not to say, you know, I'm just using these as examples of, you know, what worlds we consume our consciousness with, that allow us to accept the overall group thought mind control programs and conditioning programs. So the whole, instead of challenging the gladiator arena that is the Major League Baseball, ESPN, the NFL, the NBA, you know, all that other stuff, instead of challenging that, we accept it. We just say, oh, this is the way it is right now. When pretty much there could be somebody every day explaining and breaking down the psychological warfare of ESPN, the psychological warfare of the mainstream media, the psychological and spiritual warfare of, you know, the nationalism that is pumped through, stuff like the major league sports teams. So think about it. Like, think about the Patriots. Think about the Cleveland Indians. Think about the origins of all these and what they were. The Steelers. You know, this is all the American dream in manifested in physical form. And then people wear this shit. So people are wearing, you know, Patriots jerseys, and they're wearing, and to take it even a step further, to make it even more personal, anchor it more into their consciousness, they're wearing the name of somebody else. And to make it even further, people are wearing the name of somebody else's name on somebody else. So you're wearing a say, let's say if I was playing for the Oakland A's, right? So my name, my last name would be on the back of that jersey, but my last name is a slave name. So people, what if I was amazing? What if I was like, you know, whatever out there, somebody at the top of their game, like Ricky Henderson, stealing all them bases or something, and hitting home runs and shit like that. You know, that whole crew, that whole Dave Stewart, you know, Mark McGuire, Jose Canseco, Walt Weiss, that whole crew right there in the Battle of the Bay time frame. Just imagine imagine those names right there. Just think about like Dave Stewart. Now, for example purposes, let's say Dave Stewart. Just say Dave Stewart. Stewart was the name of the slave master who owned, you know, Dave Stewart's family, because that's what happened to my family. That's my actual last name right now. So if somebody was, you know, not Stewart's not my last, but if somebody was, you know, but you see this, you know, people are wearing these jerseys. These jerseys are the names of slave masters. Like Dick Gregory, like Baba Dick Gregory would say all the time. He would say, you know, somebody, well, you know, a black man in America, or so-called black man in America, walking around, an indigenous man in America walking around with the last name, whatever it is, Jackson, or all this other shit that's out there, Smith, what are all these Irish names and all this other stuff, O'Neill, like all this other stuff, that's similar to a so-called black man or indigenous man in America having the last name of like Nguyen or Chang or you know, Chan, or you know, something like that. It'd be like I don't know, it'd just be like Gregory Chan. Like, what's going on with you at all? Because you know my slave master in that back name, and his name was Chang. And then all the way down the system, my name is Chang now. And they're like, but you're an indigenous, dark or copper-colored black, you know, dark-skinned indigenous man, and your last name is Chang. Yes. Well, what's the difference? The only difference is the inside your brain, inside your mind, the way you feel about things. The only difference between Smith and Chang is what? The colonial mentality. You have a pride in the colonial Smith, Stewart, you know, mentality. That whole mentality. We've been conditioned to have a pride in that. You haven't been conditioned to have a pride in Chinese history or Chinese colonialism, but just understand there is no difference between Chinese being colonized by the Chinese, which is happening in Africa now. And if you still stay in this group thought, it's going to be happening everywhere too, because that group thought of the money and all that other stuff is the same thing. Anyway. So I just wanted to emphasize that whole psycho-spiritual warfare. So that's how deep it goes in like mainstream sports. So mainstream sports is mostly about nationalism, maintaining the American dream. And then also that competitive nature, that whole internationalism. So the Olympics is another version. So it's another version of mind control to maintain like national, like internationalism, that whole mentality. And then the whole technology thing. So technology is part of science and innovation. That's all in the Olympics. And then that backs up nationalism, which backs up colonialism. And then that only happens every 4 years. It's kind of like the same way you have your general elections, and then you like your presidential elections every 4 years, and the in-between stuff. So the Olympics does the same thing. It's just a nationalistic kind of like American dream mentality on a worldwide scale. So every 4 years we have the Olympics or whatever, but every year you have the NBA, the NFL, and the MLB, and all that other stuff to maintain the frequency of nationalism, internationalism, pride, and that whole enslavement consciousness in the Chang consciousness. That Chan, you know, you locked in to that you locked into that colonial mess. Psycho-spiritual colonial mess. So what's the difference? Nobody can say the difference. This is why people hit me so hard with, you know, racist stuff, but they won't say anything in reference to what I said right now, how that's an actual thing, you know, that works against us. Like, that's an actual warfare that works against us. We are forced to wear our slave names to engage in that world to some degree. I'm not saying you are completely forced, because obviously you can pull yourself out and do other things outside of that system and, you know, take care of it on your own. But on a massive scale, millions and millions and millions of people are largely, in many different ways, forced to engage in the straw man world that is based upon owning and inhabiting your slave, literal for many people in the indigenous people, literal slave storyline on every level: physical, psychological, and spiritual warfare across the board, and just livelihood. You use your debit card. You get a ticket. That's all on your slave name. What all this stuff is based upon a slave mentality, and we own it. That's the whole. This is why I say in reference to flat Earth and all that other stuff. It don't fucking. The lie is what matters. The lie is the only thing that will make you get your power back. If you focus on the models, flat versus globe, which as I said, this is a controlled opposition. If you focus on the models, you're already failing. You're done. You're done. You're doing the work, flat versus globe, even all that information, especially after it's already been 3 years of people doing flat versus globe stuff. You have to evolve. So even the so-called advanced science in terminology, interpreting of, what's going on, it still doesn't fucking matter. You're not gonna have advanced flat Earth information until you get into the humans, not the human storyline, but the mass consciousness storyline behind all the information. The numbers and the science don't matter when it really boils down to it, because if you don't have food, water, clothing, shelter, security, then you're not going to be able to interpret or be conscious of anything. So what does it matter if it's flat or globe if you can't feed your children? We're experiencing this shit right now with this whole, and I'm glad I remember this now. Hopefully the video is still running with this government shutdown shit. So the government shutdown, so like Trump, how Trump represents like he's a controlled implosion. This is what, like, a controlled demolition. Now I've been saying this for a while now. But he is supposed to represent the old colonial consciousness, which is being put on Front Street by, Black Lives Matter and all this other Killer Mike stuff and all this, mainstream. You can see that so-called colonialism, just like back in the day, the civil rights movement was controlled by the government largely in many different ways. Of course, you had different groups like the original Black Panthers, like the family of the Black Panthers who got together and started feeding kids on the street. They're not part of, COINTELPRO, no. But there are people who were infiltrated in that whole bit when it got into that international or that dealing with the national movement and that whole thing. That's when it started to get infiltrated. But the actual essence, the group, which is largely, I think it was like 71% women were Black Panthers, more than men. So that's the whole thing. The actual work is based upon the consciousness behind the models, the consciousness behind the science, like the way things are said. So this is a good breakdown of it. It's not so much about what Joe Rogan, Michio Kaku, Ray Kurzweil, Bill Nye, Elon Musk. It's not about what they say. It's how they say what they say to affect you a certain way. Let me see if I can say that again. It's not so much about what they say. It's about how they say what they say to affect you a certain way. Because that the way I worded that calibrates the individual to understand, or at least be open to understanding and overstanding the intention to break you down in a certain kind of belief system or thought process. Because that's their jobs. Like I said, when Michio Kaku goes on to MSNBC to tell you about weather modifying, like HARP and all that other stuff, the questions that are asked by the anchor, they're designed. So when he says, so what about the farmers? How is this going to affect the farmers who are in a drought time frame? And then that's throwing a softball to Michio Kaku. Michio Kaku just says, oh, you're just going to throw that right down the middle? I'm going to knock this one out the park. Well, Bill, when the good old American farmers are having a drought because Mother Nature just couldn't do it, technological humanity and innovation comes to save the day, and we can create weather systems that could pour water over your crops, and you can feed your fat asses for the rest of eternity, because the slave masters figured out a way to help out the good old American farmer. It's basically what a video like that is based upon. And you believe into that so-called innovative mentality because you've been dumbed down with all this, Jenna Marbles, sort of social media, just reviewing technology, like unbox therapy. Think about that. Unbox therapy. Like getting shit from Amazon or just out of a box is therapy for people. That's like a good example of what anti-history is in history. See, because we don't learn history in class. We're not learning history. We're not only learning a false history, which is another code. We're learning history that's designed to work against our true history, our true nature, our true existence. So that's what I call anti-history. You're learning information that's supposed to be conditioned into your world, so that blocks you. That's like a wall in many different ways. But what that is, by the way they're telling you what they're telling you, with the authority to tell you what they're telling you, what that does is that creates a space where you're not even allowed to research who and what you really are. You're not even allowed to research and express the depths of who and what you are. See, like me, if I'm in a predominantly white, so-called white area and I'm around it, like there are things like check this out. This is a good example. If I were to walk around with my shirt off in the summertime, or not even in the summertime, let's make it more obvious. In the wintertime, in a nice day in the wintertime, like it's hot outside in the wintertime. If I were to walk around like in a predominantly so-called white neighborhood, I'd be seen a certain way. Like I'd be perceived, I'd get looks a certain way, and a lot of people can't really see that. And the thing that emphasizes this is me having to explain myself is one thing that emphasizes this point. And this point is a so-called white man who just takes off his shirt and walks around in a predominantly white area. You wouldn't think twice, because that's okay. You know, that's a thing. But why is it a different thought process if I were to do it? You know, and a lot of this is, and this is a good topic to go into this too, is because there's a conditioning and this is psycho-spiritual warfare in reference to, and directly in reference to the mainstream media. So just as much as women are, not just as much, but just like women are sexualized in society, the whole savage, primitive, dark-skinned man, that tall, dark, and handsome, that whole thing sexualizes us, like the type of man that I am, by the way that I look. So if I were to walk around, with my build, the way that I am, shirt off and out there, like I seem like extra aggressive now. Whereas, somebody else, and I'm obviously speaking very generally, but that's the whole point, because that's the point of the group thought. It exists. Why does it exist? Where did it come from? Who conditioned us like this? Why the fuck does it matter? Why is there a difference between me taking my shirt off and walking around? That whole thing. So why is there a difference there? And then you're going to have new age. It's all in your head. And other people will be like, no, you're going to have all these different linear thought versions of it, how I'm right and how I'm wrong and how I'm kind of right and how I'm kind of wrong and all this other stuff. You see how each people approaches all this stuff from their own, where it is there, because they're really talking to themselves, really. Like nobody really knows me on YouTube. Like the social media is YouTube's like a tiny little fraction of the individual. So this is just a portion of information that I'm sharing based upon what could be shared and received and so and all these other things that are going on in the world. And then whatever appears. But is that who I am? No, of course not. That's not me, just like anybody else. And that's what I'm, asking so-called, truthers and whatever on this internet is share a little bit more of that perspective that involves engaging in how we are conditioned, not just in what we are conditioned with and by. How we are conditioned and how we have been conditioned and how that affects us. That is how you grow, actually literally evolve into a next level of consciousness. Sitting around and just hoping and waiting for the thought process, the mainstream thought process, to change gears or shift gears, you know, that ain't gonna do shit for you. And if you want to do that, that's the code, that's the design. It's the intention for that. These Philip DeFranco's, like I said, they give you limited extremes of, you know, lower and higher, or extremes of whatever you want to see it as. Like I said, medium rare or rare, you know, some people go to extremes, and then some people are just well off into the mainstream world, and they're just, you know, well done steak with A1 sauce, and they're eating, you know, that Salisbury steak hungry man dinner, you know, that whole thing. And then people who are like polishing it, like I said, polishing the American dream, think they got that perfect ribeye at medium rare, it's perfectly seasoned, and, you know, it's still juicy and all that other stuff. You're still eating, you know, like a parasitic, you're in like a parasitic mentality. But you see the difference though. So the extremes of the other side, you know, and rare, people being proud of, literally that's what's happening now. Yeah, on YouTube, people having pride. And to the opposite side of the extreme vegans, now you have people who are only eating like raw meat. Like, this is a real thing that's going on now. So this is a side effect to group thought, or the psycho-spiritual group thought, with the access of all this information and being able to share all this information. These are the side effects. This is what happens when people, you know, are still, in many different ways, at least subconsciously, attached to the group thought in some kind of way. So, like I said, and I'll end it on this, just imagine what it would be like if we weren't even subjected to any of this. If we had like our little groups where we were allowed, just think about that, allowed to, you know, take care of yourself. You weren't forced to do all this other stuff and all this. Oh, that's what I was saying about the government shutdown stuff. So the government shutdown stuff is another part of conditioning you to be codependent on the system, and also kind of like triggering like things that are put out there. False flags are out there. Like the government shutdown is like, has the same effect on people like false flags does. It envelops our stokes emotion. It gets a lot of people thinking about stuff. A lot of it, people start defending, you know, the systems. People start attacking the systems, and that's all well and good for the overall group thought system, because you're pumping energy into that. And then they just evolve. Like I said, they pick their extremes from here and there, and then they sell whatever extreme based upon what you asked for from the so-called leaders you think you put out there. Like your politicians, which you don't vote for, your celebrities, which you don't pick, and they're not out there because they're super intelligent or super talented. No, a lot of them are there. And why do you think they're so quiet? Same way why you have athletes out there with all this damn money. They're paid all that money to keep their mouths shut. Why do you think all that? How long do you think it would take for me to name all the so-called influential celebrities and athletes that I've had in my life, and on television and all that other stuff, so-called influential, who are supposed to be influential? Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people in Hollywood, in, you know, the sporting arena, in and out around all that stuff. All these people, yet what? No word on the whole mainstream group thought. No word on the New World agenda. You know, very generally, if anybody's saying anything, it's like less than 1% of those people who are in the millions, and even less than that. They're paid to keep their mouth shut. And that's one side. The other side is people are just ignorant, a lot of it. Because that's the norm. It's the mainstream thing, is to be ignorant and just, you know, keep your head down and just allow humanity to evolve itself. But we don't know what the fuck humanity is. That's just a fucking word. We don't know what evolve is. All our definitions are based on bullshit. It's all make-believe. It's all made up. Look at what you're looking at now. This is all bullshit. Ariana Grande, you know, a bunch of false flag shit, just like these man children, the Try Guys, this unboxed therapy shit. that what's that other one? Where they do all kinds of trick shots like that. All that shit is just like this empty. There's nothing to it. Rams versus the Saints. And then, just like flat versus globe, we get consumed with, the sporting teams that are rigged. And the Saints versus the Rams and the Patriots. Well, the Ram represents this in the star constellations during this time, so the Illuminati is saying this based upon this false flag with the Patriots, and it was supposed to be based upon that call and all this other stuff. And all that time you make fucking how many thousands of hours of videos are made focusing on all that information and missing the whole next so-called consciousness, or the macro scale of those linear interpretations of what, or observations, not even interpretations, it's observations largely, larger than that. We don't understand like how and why is a lot of that information on point sometimes. Largely. Why are the teams rigged? Why is it an international rigged system? Why are we being ushered into a new world order? And then how? And then start breaking it down like that. Because if you play their game, which is what this the linear world, being invited into the linear world, that's their game. That's the way the system keeps allowing the people to just enslave themselves. You don't go beyond what's presented to you. So they put this little bait and hook out there, and you bite it every fucking time. The last big hook that I bit was the New Age community connected to that world. The bigger another hook that I didn't bite, but I was aware of, I saw it, was this mainstream kind of approach towards flat earth. And now you can see it now. It's coming to life now with people like Owen Benjamin talking about it. 4,000 people a live stream on a daily basis. 4,000 people. He's constantly in the flat earth conversation. He's been on the podcast with Joe Rogan. So he's basically a Joe Rogan dude. So Joe Rogan is basically talking about flat earth now. It's only a matter of time. And he's also taking the side of Alex Jones. So like I've been saying a few years ago, Alex Jones, Joe Rogan, and that whole string of consciousness will indefinitely be, or inevitably be, in the flat earth conversation. It's happening now. Owen Benjamin is that, linchpin or whatever that is. He's the glue that's, at least, or the spark that's sparking that little spark plug to start the motor of that mainstream conversation talking about it. Just think about it. You got Eddie Bravo, Joe Rogan, Alex Jones, and Owen Benjamin. 4 powerhouses of so-called truthful information. You think they're going to get out of the year without, talking to each other or having some kind of interactive something? And you think they're not going to talk about flat earth? What is Joe Rogan? He's going to hold the line with flat, all that bullshit. Alex Jones is probably going to lean more towards Owen Benjamin than the flat earth shit. He'll probably move over. And then you'll have the split between the Joe Rogan New World Order mentality that'll be with Killer Mike and all that other shit. And Oprah and Eckhart Tolle and Tony Ryan, all them people protecting the colonial mentality. And then you'll have the other people, the fake truther community, going off following Owen Benjamin, Alex Jones, and all the other people who left Joe Rogan, and all those other people who are just like, oh yes, that's the Godzilla and Mothra team right there. Joe Rogan and all the other Netflix crews, crew members, and versus Owen Benjamin, Alex Jones. This is like Mothra versus, or what was it, like King Kong versus Godzilla. And then there's a dumbass movie like that. That's what this is. King Kong versus Godzilla. And so they made up Godzilla with the Alex Jones and all that other stuff. And Joe Rogan's gonna be that monkey head ass King Kong. So it's King Kong versus Godzilla. That's the consciousness that's gonna usher everybody. So they're just little talking heads, nothing. Then their word really don't matter. You know, what really matters is what comes out of the mouth of the people at the United Nations and the politicians and all that other stuff. They're just influenced by, supposedly, by these entertainers. That's what we're led to believe by the pushers of this information. But we know it's all one storyline for people who are listening to this. We know it's all one bullshit storyline. Especially when you can look at this trending page right now and see this. See what you are fed to believe or fed to watch. You know, this is all garbage. Constantly being enforced with violence and these kind of just animalistic lower body sorts of consciousness triggers. So violence, horror, sex, like I said, the sexualization of certain people. It creates a fear. So like I said, like if I were to walk around my shirt off, I'd be seen a certain way because of how darker skinned people have been sexualized in society, even in the porn industry. That's a whole thing too, and that stems from the whole Mandingo slave time frame and that whole psychological mind warping of both the slaves and the slave owners. So the slave owners, they're already fucked up. Then you got the family members who are in this weird in-between space where they're not slaves, they're not slave masters, but they are. They have this weird sort of I'm more human than you. So you have like all these. So not only they're more human than us, but we're less human than what's normal. So we're basically animals. See, that shit hasn't been... See, when I mention that stuff, people with a linear consciousness will say, well, you're always talking about racism. I'm like, no. You know, pump your fucking brakes for a moment and realize that I'm bringing up these topics because the healing of that realization or that reality has not only never been addressed, has not only never been brought up to the degree that it needs to be brought up, but it's being held from. We're not being allowed to go there. Largely a lot of the times because of the way, like I said, the system wants you to focus on forward progress, the evolution of the enslavement machine. This is why Joe Rogan is always saying, I think it's a win for science and a win for innovation when China goes to the moon. He's talking about the innovating, the expansion of the enslavement program. This is what he's really saying. And then they say, oh, well, no. It's like, no, you're defending the enslavement program. You're automatically a terrorist or against them because you call their innovation world, their innovation universe, the heliocentric universe, the technological transhumanism simulation universe, all that stuff that they're getting ready to sell to people, CERN, all that other bullshit. That is their best thing. That is their fabric of reality. You do not exist in their universe when you do not believe into the consciousness of the fabric of their reality. And when you do not do that, you become a threat, and you become not only a threat, but you become a threat. You become anti. Like your existence shouldn't even matter, pretty much. Like because you are not on the team of the ever evolving tidal wave of human monkey evolution. You're not even on the boat. You're not there. You're on an island somewhere called just like they box up, they boil everybody, like the mainstream, they use Christianity as a punching bag for science, so-called science. So-called conspiracy theorists or whatever, or truthers or whatever, they put people on that island too, and then they'll be like, oh, okay, we're gonna keep going on our boat of innovation and evolution. See you guys later on your islands of being dumb and being idiots. Stay on your islands of being dumb idiots. We're going to keep cruising on our jet stream, our jet skis of innovation and technology into the future. And eventually we're going to end up on Mars. Get the fuck out of here. On that note, you know what I'm talking about. So I'm going to get out of here on that note. Start addressing a lot of these topics, or talking to some of the people in the comment section if you engage in the comment section, or wherever you do. Even if you talk to some of the people who make videos right now, start pressuring some of these people to expand outside of the linear, flat versus globe, and start talking about how that's a whole world you could approach. How we're conditioned, how we're controlled. That's a more complex version. And you can still talk about flat versus globe if you wanted to in that process. But at least start integrating it more. Start integrating how and why the stuff works. We already know what the fuck is going on to some degree. We know there's a what within the soul, the mind, and the body going on. There's a physical, psychological, spiritual warfare. We know about the parasites, these viruses, and all this other stuff, the mainstream consciousness. Start dissecting and, disassembling the conditioning programs that exist in our everyday realities. That's how you really start to evolve. That's how you really start to change. And that's how you really start to hold a space to be able to hold this system accountable for what it's doing, rather than just being subjected to what it does. That's a different world. See, people who are only focusing on the linear concepts are still engaging in what the system does. But your power exists outside of what the system does. Your potential, it goes well beyond that. And that's what I was saying. Like, what could we be doing? What would we be doing if we weren't limited to this anti-thought group consciousness? We'd be doing a whole bunch of very potent little things. Like a little group over here, if we had all these, whatever it is, it doesn't even have to be, it'd be music, it could be food, it could be, growing something, it could be, another version of something else, whatever it is. But the main thing is to focus on something. Some people are good at certain things. And you can have a group of people somewhere else doing a whole bunch of shit, like really good shit. But since we are only focused on what the university system or the innovative group thought consciousness of the Western mind tells us, you have all these great musicians and great composers and great, chefs and great, amazing, builders and all kinds of different kinds of work that could be done, that could be very beneficial to all of us. All these people are working, part-time jobs, 5 different part-time jobs just to make ends meet. Ain't doing shit close to what their soul vibrates with, what their artistic sort of notes and frequencies are designed to do. You're not designed to work at Popcornology. You're not designed to work at the AMC theater. You're not designed to, this is not what you're designed to do. But since the system has told you, has imposed these designs upon us, we accept it as our only reality. And it boils down to, like I said in the beginning, those words, because that's a belief system. Think about that belief system. The belief system of innovation and science. That is a religion. And that's what this system is trying to protect. So, yeah, on that note, thank you for joining me. And until next time, from all my relations, peace, love, and harmony.